morning. I want to start by asking you all a question. Have you ever lost something that was very special to you that you wanted to get back? Something that you really cared about, a person, a thing? I think we've all experienced that sense of loss, that gut-wrenching feeling. Well, that's what happened to the people of New Orleans on August 29, 2005, when Katrina ripped apart our city and one of our most significant structures. For the people of New Orleans, the Superdome symbolized strength, prosperity, power, events, jobs. It was a place where New Orleanians came to watch their football team. In 1975, when it was built as the future of New Orleans, and it helped establish the city as a sports destination. And to the nation, it was a place where so many memorable sports moments had taken place. Ali Spink's 1978. How many remember that? Michael Jordan's last shot to win the Final Four in 1982. This was a very special place for all of our New Orleanians. And now the Superdome was about to enter another chapter in its history. But this was an ugly chapter. The world watched for several days as 30,000 people struggled to survive in the squalor and the deplorable conditions as the Superdome was pressed into service as a refuge of last resort. There was no power, no running water, no functioning toilets. The heat was oppressive. For those inside, it was a living hell. Every square inch of the building had been touched or damaged in some kind of way. In the blink of an eye, the Superdome went from being a symbol of pride for the city of New Orleans to the poster child for suffering and misery. It now came to represent something else: horror, devastation, and despair. How could this be? It wasn't supposed to end this way. A building that had meant so much to a community was now struggling to survive. It was on life support, and there were questions about its future. Well, the story could have ended right there, and we wouldn't be here today. Many called for it to be condemned and torn down. But what happened over the next several months was unprecedented. The Superdome would become the largest stadium reconstruction project in American history. A project with monumental scale that would normally take several years to rebuild was rebuilt in only 1 year after the devastation. Impossible, you say? Not if you ask the people that were involved in the rebuilding effort to bring it back to life. So what was it that enabled us to accelerate the schedule and finish this project under the most extreme conditions? I can stand here and tell you that it was because we had private sector business principles that were applied to a large-scale public project, that we had architects and engineers and the best plans. While all of that would be true, I believe there was something else at play here, a phenomenon that I call unity of purpose, which is what occurs when you combine a compelling idea with inspiration and a will to win. We've seen this throughout history. Unity of purpose can be a powerful thing. We've seen it play out in sports organizations, business organizations, and even politics. For the stakeholders who were swept into this project, they may have all had different reasons for being involved, but they all shared one common goal, and that was to play a football game on September 25th, 2006. In order to give you a sense of the magnitude and the challenges that we had to overcome, it's important for me now to give you some personal perspective and background. It started for me on September 1st, 2005, as we lifted off from the dome's parking lot. This is what I saw: the 9.6-acre roof of the Superdome that had been ripped apart. As we passed out over the city, I could see the devastation. It was catastrophic. As we flew out over the neighborhoods and circled out over the lakefront, I could see the water up to the rooftops. I looked down and I could even see my street that had 7 feet of water. I never will forget the feeling as I looked back over my left shoulder to the Superdome in the distance. I could see the city skyline, and I thought, it's over. This is epic. Get a good look at it because I'll never be back. Our city's gone, the Superdome's gone, and now my home is gone. And I don't mind telling you, I cried all the way to Baton Rouge. on that 1-hour flight. But I say that God gives us something in the human DNA that allows us to pick ourselves up and overcome great tragedies. And that's what happened here. 4 days later, we were back in the dome, assessing the damage. Of course, all the evacuees were gone, but the scars were still there. Trash, debris, 4,000 tons of it. Human waste. The conditions were unbelievable. Imagine the worst in your mind, and it was worse than that. But projects all start from an idea, creative imagination, great concepts. And for us, our glimmer of hope came on September 30th when the architects who were assessing the damage said it might be possible to rebuild it. Now, this is 30 days after Katrina, but it's going to take well over $200 million and over 2 years. And that's assuming your mechanical and electrical systems are intact and we can rid the building of mold. But that was enough for us. That was the glimmer of hope that we needed to at least give us the possibility. But what good is great ideas or creative imagination or great concepts if you don't have someone to share them with who can be convinced that they're worth pursuing? This project needed momentum. And there were 3 key individuals who needed to step up and say yes in order to provide that momentum for it to occur. Governor Kathleen Blanco, governor of the state of Louisiana, what she cared about was recovery. She was under great pressure to accelerate the pace of recovery. She needed jobs. She needed rebuilt infrastructure. But the scale of this disaster was so big, it was hard to even figure out where to start. I remember our first meeting with her on October the 11th, 2005. We went in and we said, Governor, they tell us it can be rebuilt. It's going to take over $200 million and probably more than 2 years, but we have to do it. It's the only chance we have to get our sports team back and to stimulate jobs for our economy. The minute we turn that roof white again, people are going to believe. And despite her own staff saying no, people will never understand how you can put a sports facility ahead of the neighborhoods. She had the courage to say yes, we have to redo it. 1 month later, she would sign an executive order allowing us to accelerate the pace of the project by avoiding any of the procurement rules in the state of Louisiana. Those 2 decisions were monumental. Without them, this project doesn't happen. Paul Tagliabue, commissioner of the NFL, he understood the power of the NFL and what it could mean to a city. But more importantly, he understood that this was a great human tragedy, and he wanted to personally help. He was prepared to put the brand of the NFL behind this project and give it the momentum that it needed. I remember an early meeting with Paul in October of 2005. We were laying out our plans about the rebuilding process and telling him it was going to take 2 years and over $200 million, and he stopped me in mid-sentence and he says, it can't be the same old Saints in the same old dome. Now's your chance to do something different. I'm thinking, did he see what happened to us? Of course he did. But he was right. This was our chance to do something different. We were going to have to find new money, not just the money that FEMA was going to supply to us, but new money to make it a better place and erase those memories, those negative images of the past. Shortly thereafter, he would have Roger Goodell call me and ask if there was any way we could accelerate the schedule and get it open by September of 2006, 1 year sooner than what we had planned. I said, gee, Roger, I don't think that's possible. He said, would it help if we gave you money? I said, well, money always helps, but I don't think this is a matter of money. This is a matter of scale. You know, we were facing labor challenges, material shortages. There were only 40,000 people living in the city of New Orleans at that time, but I said, give us a little time and let us try to figure out what we can do. I called him back a week later and said, here are the conditions. We can have it football ready. That was the term we used, which meant that we wouldn't have all the suites finished. We may not have all the concession stands and the restrooms done, and we may not even have all the seats in the terrace. He said to me, quote, I don't give a damn. You give me turf, make it safe for the fans, and we'll play football. So with that, Tom Benson, the New Orleans Saints owner, they were living in San Antonio in exile. the families displaced, the families of the players, the staff, and their future was uncertain. Who knew if they would even have a market to come back to? Tom had heard that I was talking to the league about accelerating the schedule, and he called me a couple of days after I spoke to Roger. And he says, I understand you've been talking to the league about opening the building in September. He said, do you realize that this is the National Football League and I can't be moving my team all over God's creation? I need to know, are we going to be able to play football? I said, yes, Mr. B, you'll be able to play football, but you may not have all the suites and we may not have all the seats in the terrace, and we may not have all the concession stands. He says, you know, if you're wrong, they're going to run you and me out of town. And your career's going to be over. I said, yes, sir, I understand that, but I don't have very far to fall. I'm already on the floor. So we chuckled and talked for the next 20 minutes about how we were going to do it. Now, I stop right there and I tell people, do you think for 1 minute that we all knew, this team of people, that we could open that building in September? Hell no. We hadn't received the first penny from FEMA. We hadn't refinanced any of our debt. We were still struggling with scoping the project and figuring out how we were going to get labor and materials. But did we believe it? You betcha. Despite our own diverse reasons for being involved in this project, we were now united as one with a shared vision, a commitment to rebuild. And with that, we were off. We were off and running. 2 weeks later, Tom Benson would announce the Saints are moving back to New Orleans. And shortly after that, Paul Tagliabue pasted this sign on the side of the building so that we wouldn't forget it. Reopening, September 25th, 2006, Saints versus Falcons, Monday Night Football. Nothing like a little pressure. But what I saw at that point was truly remarkable. The pace of the job actually accelerated. Despite all the financial challenges and the challenges with the schedule and materials and labor, the fact that we had local contractors, 35 of the 37 contractors, architects, and professionals that worked on this job were locals. Many of them had fathers who had worked on the Superdome when it was being built. There was a great sense of pride and unity among our team. And what I saw over the next several months was something that was truly remarkable. 850 men and women at the peak of this job working 6 days a week, 10 to 12 hours a day, with one thing in mind, and that was to play a football game on September 25th, 2006. In the spring of 2006, we were spending $15 million a month. The scale of the job was staggering. We were making $1 million decisions each day. 1.6 million square feet of carpet, 800,000 square feet of sheetrock, 750,000 square feet of ceiling tiles, a $32.5 million roof job. Unthinkable. The project scale was so large. But as we moved through the summer, you could feel the energy in the building every day. It kept building, the momentum. And in the end, in September, we had accomplished so much more than we ever thought possible. All of those areas that we told the NFL might not be done were now finished. And yes, even the $32.5 million roof job finished 40 days ahead of schedule. Imagine that. So, on September 25th, 2006, New Orleans came home. And yes, we played a football game. And yes, the Saints did their part by beating the Falcons. But it was more than just football that night. This symbolized so much more than that. It was about staring adversity in the eye and winning. It was about us putting a stake in the ground and saying New Orleans is going to make it. This was our opportunity to say that to the world. And there was so much emotion in that building and so much pride in that building that night. There were many people that walked in the door with tears in their eyes and disbelief. And for me, there was a personal moment that occurred when you too took the stage. I found myself standing on the field as the lights and the house came down. I suddenly realized that these light levels were eerily similar to what we'd experienced on August 29, 2005, that morning that Katrina hit. As I looked up into the building, I didn't watch the show. I turned to face the crowd. I wanted to see the fans. I realized that I was seeing people for the first time in these seats since Katrina. And I had a chill come down my back as I looked up over my head and I saw the roof where it was once gashed. It's now closed. I looked around the building, and it was then I realized how far we had come. The Superdome, New Orleans living room, a place where so many memories had taken place, a facility that was beaten and battered, left for dead, had now been brought back to life and had regained its rightful place in history. But I realized something right then. It was the people of New Orleans who give it life. It was the people of New Orleans who had given that building life. And then Irma Thomas sang the national anthem, the house lights came up, and I knew at that moment New Orleans' recovery had begun. So where are we 10 years later? We've had over $350 million of investment into the Superdome. It's been completely modernized. We've been able to join with the New Orleans Saints to redevelop an adjacent piece of real estate called Champion Square that is functioning as a festival plaza for us. We've been able to generate special events. In addition to the annual events that we host, the Sugar Bowl, the Essence Festival, the Bayou Classic, we've hosted a Super Bowl, a men's Final Four, 2 BCS Championships, 2 NBA All-Star games, a WrestleMania. Those events alone have generated nearly $1 billion in economic impact for our city. Not bad for a facility that was left for dead and no one thought could be rebuilt. So what did we learn from all this? What are the life lessons? Number one, out of disaster sometimes comes opportunity. Number two, don't ever underestimate the power of the human spirit and the will to win. And number three, mankind's greatest achievements usually come about when individuals unite with commitment behind a single common purpose for the greater good. Thank you.